Hi, Julia and Natalia. It's Tennille here, just checking that you can hear me.
I can, thank you.
Hello, Natalia, it's Kathy. Can I do a quick sound check?
Thanks, Kathy.
Councillor Veith here, testing.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special council meeting of the City of Waterloo, Monday, March 22nd, 2021 at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Let's begin by doing a roll call, beginning with Ward 1.
Good afternoon. Councillor Hanmer present.
Councillor Bodley here.
Councillor Veith present.
Councillor Freeman, present.
Councillor Vasic present.
Councillor Henry present.
Councillor Bonacore present.
And I'm here as well. That means we're all here. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we are broadcasting from today, and many of us are gathering, is on the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. Let's take a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And in light of that, last week in Atlanta, a despicable, misogynistic, and hate-filled racist attack occurred that saw 8 innocent lives lost, 6 of which were Asian American women. There are no words strong enough to condemn such a horrific and senseless act. On behalf of my fellow council members and the residents of the City of Waterloo, I offer our sincere condolences to the families and friends who are grieving the loss of their loved ones. As a community and organization, we condemn all forms of violence. We are united in our stand against racism and hatred. As a city, we are committed to creating change and to anti-racism initiatives, in part by embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion knowledge and staff experts in our organization. Around the world, including in Canada, people with Asian backgrounds have been increasingly subjected to racial slurs and violence since the start of the pandemic. Sadly, women also continue to be victimized by these cowardice acts. Together, we can and must stop the violence and the hatred. Continuing on in our agenda, I have disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Hearing none. Next up is approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes there. I will ask Ward 1, Ward 2 to consider, well, first I'll check to see if there are any edits of the minutes. Hearing none, I'll look to Ward 1 to Ward 2 to consider moving a motion to approve the minutes and voting on them.
It's Councillor Hanmer. I'm happy to make the motion to approve the 3 sets of minutes that were in our package, and I will vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley will second the motion, vote in favor as well.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman, in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonacore in favour.
And the mayor's in favor too. The minutes are approved. Next up is the consent motion consisting of 3 items. Item A, significant festivals and events. B, the annual statement of remuneration and expenses for elected officials. And C, demolition control applications, a 2020 summary. I think there was a council member who wanted to make a comment on one of those. And if not, I'll assume we can take those all together. And I'll look for Ward 3, Ward 4 to move and approve, move the approval of the consent agenda, consent motion.
Councillor Veith here. I move the consent motion and I vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman, I second the motion and also vote in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonago in favour.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
And I'm in favor too. That carries unanimously. Moving on to item 11, staff reports. Item A, corporate diversity, equity and inclusion progress update. Prepared by Pam and Anna Marie, and I'll pass it over to our CAO, Mr. Tim Anderson, for some introductory remarks.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just doing a sound check. You hear me okay?
Sounds excellent.
Okay, thanks, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to kick off the City of Waterloo Corporate Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Progress Report. This is a report and presentation really about the City of Waterloo as an employer, so it really has that internal lens. This is a journey which formally began back in 2018 and has had constant engagement of staff from across the organization. Our work started with a diversity and inclusion task force and now is currently being led by working groups, which we're going to hear more about 40 people engaged in this process across the organization. Today we'll hear about where we are on the journey, and I say journey because this really is a longer term strategic approach for us as an organization, but it has incremental bite-sized steps for us to take along the way. After forming the internal Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Task Force in 2018, again with representation from across the city, we recognized the real need to baseline where we were at as an organization. And this led the team to selecting an organization called the Canadian Centre for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, CCDI. And this is an organization with a national outreach. They're a national social enterprise organization, and they're focused on workplace diversity and inclusion in both the public sector and private sector spaces. So this is our first progress report to Council, and it's again related to our internal diversity, equity and inclusion work. And a big thank you to Pam Albright and Anna Marie Cipriani and Cameron Rapp and all the working group members that have culminated in today's presentation of materials. I'll turn it to Pam. She's going to lead us through a presentation and then we'll be open for questions, Mayor. So over to you, Pam.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Mayor Jaworski and members of council. It's good to be here today to talk with you about the progress made on the city's internal diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI implementation plan. Before moving on, I do want to just draw your attention to the logo on the bottom left-hand side of the slide. This logo that says "We All Belong" was first developed to promote the Census Survey that we're going to talk more about, and it's now used as branding for internal work done by the DEI working groups. Next slide, please. In this presentation, I'll start with some context, including a 6-step process organizations can follow to make progress on this work. I'll talk about the Diversity Census and Inclusion Survey that the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, or CCDI for short, conducted at the City of Waterloo in 2019, and I'll point to some of the findings. Then I want to tell you about the implementation plan and the progress we've made on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in our organization. Finally, I'll provide some highlights on the progress that we've made, as well as some of the next steps we plan to take. Next slide, please. In terms of context, I think it's important to understand what has led us to where we are at this point. Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement have made an impact around the world and locally. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's work has made significant impact across Canada. The work of these movements has made it clear that urgent action is needed to address disproportionate outcomes or inequities. In our own organization, City of Waterloo leadership recognized the need to establish a corporate baseline to identify and address inequities and create a workplace where we all belong and thrive. And so in 2019, a diversity census and inclusion survey was administered by the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. And as Tim has noted, CCDI is a nonprofit organization providing diversity and inclusion support and expertise to Canadian workplaces. Conducting this census survey is significant in our organization as it established a baseline. It's significant in our region as City of Waterloo is the only local municipality that has completed an assessment of inclusion. And it's significant across Canada as we understand that at the time of conducting this survey, we were only the 5th municipality in Canada to do this work with CCDI. As such, the findings of our census survey are contributing to the ability to look at our sector as a whole and provide information on what municipalities need to do better. Next slide, please. As an employer partner of CCDI, the City of Waterloo has access to the resources and information they provide. CCDI recommends that organizations approach diversity and inclusion work in the following way. Build the business case to articulate why this work is important. Assess what needs to be addressed. Develop a strategy for doing the work. Execute the strategy. Measure your progress, and repeat the cycle again because this work needs to be understood as ongoing. The City of Waterloo is currently at the execute stage in our first round of this process. Next slide, please. City of Waterloo's census survey was open to all regular full, part-time, and contract staff and was conducted in spring 2019. The census survey established the following organizational baseline: the demographic composition of employees, the representativeness of the workforce compared to our community, and the two comparators used were the CMA, also known as Census Metropolitan Area, from 2016 census data, and the Ontario labor force. The census survey also measured the representativeness of the workforce across the organization, and finally, the employee inclusion experience within the organization. Next slide, please. There has been significant support for this work from the outset. The 70% response rate is unprecedented in our organization and very high compared to response rates to similar surveys in other municipalities. In terms of findings, I want to draw your attention to the most significant of the disproportionate outcomes. When we compare the organization to the community using the CMA census data, racialized persons and women are less represented. In higher pay bands, that is greater than $90,000 per year, when compared to their overall workforce representation, women, persons with a disability, and racialized persons are less represented. In addition, women were found to be less represented in management when compared to their overall workforce representation at City of Waterloo. Next slide, please. The survey portion explored a total of 13 inclusion indicators, which were ranked in order to identify areas of improvement. Inclusion experiences were found to be low across the organization. CCDI disaggregated the data and further found that persons with a disability reported the lowest inclusion experience, and women reported the second lowest inclusion experience. These findings give us a clear picture of what we need to focus on in order to become a workplace in which everyone belongs. Next slide, please. Having completed our first round of assessment, it was time to develop a strategy, and the city's internal diversity, equity, and inclusion implementation plan was created. The plan used CCDI's 8 recommendations and 20 strategies as the framework for the way forward. A new corporate structure was created and populated to carry out the work of implementation. The steering group provides leadership and ensures that progress on the implementation plan is made. The resource group provides support to the steering group. 5 working groups are playing specific roles to address barriers and contribute to our collective learning. The Awareness Working Group leads efforts related to informal learning on DEI topics. The Communications and Engagement Working Group ensures strategies outlined in the implementation plan are communicated effectively across the organization. The Inclusive Workplace Working Group's focus is on addressing structural and systemic barriers in our workplace. The Measurement and Monitoring Working Group monitors and reports on our progress. And finally, the Respectful Workplace Working Group's focus is to address conflict, harassment, and discrimination in ways that meet employee needs and legislative requirements. More than 40 staff from across the organization have come forward to join these working groups and actively participate in the work of implementation. Next slide, please. We've pulled a few highlights from the report with regard to progress. In terms of challenges, so much of what is needed is a shift in corporate culture, and that takes time. And just as with so many other initiatives, COVID-19 has created challenges. The working groups had just got up and running at the end of January 2020. Then some had to stop meeting for a few months to allow their members to focus on pandemic response. However, by fall 2020, all working groups were able to adapt and resume meeting virtually. Yet in spite of these challenges, we've been able to complete or initiate 65% of the strategies recommended by CCDI. Some highlights of the work to date include a Recognition Day program that provides informal learning opportunities related to celebrations and observances, including Black History Month, Tri-Pride, National Indigenous Peoples Day, International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and many others. Training is taking place with a focus on foundational aspects of DEI, and there has been a very high level of interest in these courses, which again, I think speaks to the level of engagement and interest among staff to move this work forward. And 2 significantly revamped corporate policies and procedures have been launched: the Corporate Human Rights Accommodation Request Procedure and the Corporate Respectful Workplace Policy and Program. Next slide, please. While some good work has been done, we know there's a lot more to do. DEI working groups will continue to support the work of implementation. The new Indigenous Initiatives, Anti-Racism, Accessibility, and Equity team will be hired. And we thank members of Council for supporting this initiative. In particular, Councillor Vasic has been supporting the hiring process for the director of this new team. We'll continue to build a training program, and we will administer a follow-up census survey in the next 2 to 3 years, the timing of which will align with other strategic processes. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. This actually does conclude our presentation, and we welcome any questions that members of council may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pam, and Anna Marie, who's in the behind the scenes there, and Mr. Anderson. I'll just look to see if council have any questions of staff. Thank you very much for giving us this this baseline. I think that's very key. I did have a question for Mr. Anderson, in particular on the baseline. So if I read this report on page 6 about inclusion experience across the organization, and I read that with a business lens, that you know, is certainly something that is one lens. But how about with the municipal lens? How do we compare to other municipalities with our baseline? Certainly there's nowhere to go but up, but I just wanted to see how we compare on a baseline with respect to municipalities rather than, say, businesses.
Thanks, Mayor, for the question. As Pam had noted, we are one of the early adopters from a municipal perspective to participate in the survey. And I think we were number 5 or number 6 in total of municipal participants. And CCDI did coach us, you know, that it's really difficult to compare against other organizations. Your culture is your own culture. There are many factors that influence the responses of your staff teams. And many of those factors could be geography, could be the local CMA population, lots of different reasons for it. But certainly verbally, our results weren't unnormal from what they were seeing in the public sector. I think we are seeing some differences in private versus public sector. But again, as you say, it's our baseline. I think we recognize as senior leaders that there's work and attention that is required to help promote those inclusive behaviors across our organization.
Great, thank you, Mr. Anderson. I do see Councillor Vasic has her hand up, and I know it was her intention to move this, and then followed by Councillor Hanmer with a comment. So please go ahead, Councillor Vasic.
Thanks through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks everyone for this report. I do have one question about just sort of the concept of intersectionality. And so when we see the data in the report and in the presentation, it's presented as individuals, someone who has a disability, LGBTQ, a racialized person, or a woman, for example, but we know that a person can experience all or a combination of these marginalized identities. And so I'm just curious if the concept of intersectionality has or will be incorporated into this work and these conversations moving forward and to date. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Vasic. I'll turn this one maybe to Pam to start. Certainly there's been learnings through our process on the survey itself and how we might improve as we move forward. But Pam, do you want to take a turn at responding here?
Sure, thank you, Tim. And through you, Mayor Jaworski, yes, thanks for that question, Councillor Vasic. I think it's true that the way in which this data has been presented, it does put it into very demographic silos. But I think certainly as an organization, as members of working groups, we do want to take that intersectional approach, recognizing very much what you were saying, that there are many different factors that play into a person's identity and therefore their experience. And so I think while, yeah, I think there's definitely room to be more clear about that. And I think that we will certainly want to be incorporating those approaches as we move forward.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much. It's great that you have it on your mind, and then it's just with the data that's used, it can be tough to do that. So appreciate that you have that kind of nuance in the background going on. Thank you.
And I will look to Councillor Hanmer, then Councillor Bonagor, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Pam and Anna Marie, thank you very much for the comprehensive report, and Tim as well, and the update on a lot of great work that's gone on in the looking at how we can improve in this area and be more of an inclusive organization within our community. You've done a great job, so I appreciate that. I do have a question, and I should have indicated that, Mayor, I'm sorry. With respect to the data and as you're talking about the representation, whether it's less or more, and is that based on the responses that were given in the survey, or is there some other factor that goes into that? I'm just struggling a little bit with, for example, if it's racialized persons are 8.9% less represented from what's the starting point?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Hanmer. That I'm going to turn to Pam as well, and it's based on our CMA data, but Pam will drive a little bit deeper into the response.
Sure, thanks, Tim. And again, through you, Mayor Jaworski, there's two comparators for the most part that were used, and so when we're talking about comparisons to the community, yes, absolutely. What Tim said, we're comparing with census data, in particular the CMA Census Metropolitan Area data for Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo, and it's the labor force portion of that. So I think while it's in the report, we've tried to be clear when we're making those statements. So yeah, so like I said, the comparators to community are against that subset of census data, and then there are instances where there is some comparison done across the organization. And again, I think we've tried to note that.
Okay, so it's based on the values that are in those two reports. So to look at knowing what does 19.6% mean, actually you'd have to take a look at the overall workforce report within the city. Or the CMA, the CMA data,
CMA.
going back to my earlier, the racialized persons of less than 8.9% less, that I'd have to look at the CMA labor force data to understand what that actually is in absolute terms.
Right, and I think yes, and you're right that 8.9% figure does speak to the that's a comparison to the CMA data. I'm just looking at the report here and can confirm that. And what I'm seeing in the information I have about CMA data is that racialized persons in the Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo CMA labor force represents 16.9% of the population of this community.
Okay, that's helpful. So there's a little bit more link that I need to do to understand truly what that number is telling us. It's an area that we need to improve upon, but to know the absolute number, there's a bit more work. Again, a lot of great work has been done, so thank you. I appreciate the efforts, and I look forward to receiving further updates as you continue on the plan. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Hanmer, and over to you, Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you for bringing all this forward. It's great to see things starting to move, or see this process getting started. I mean, I just have a couple of questions. The first is related to Councillor Hanmer's question. I'm just curious about the use of labour force data as our kind of the number that we're pegging ourselves to. I'm just wondering, is there a danger that we might end up setting goals that underrepresent groups that are historically underrepresented in the workforce? Or is that taken into account as we put our numbers together?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bonagor. Yes, I'm going by memory, and Pam will maybe speak to this one, or Anna Marie as well, in terms of the data, but CCDI definitely asked that we do compare against the labor force data locally. Again, us as an employer, where's our best suited comparator group? And that's the kind of best practice at the time that CCDI had indicated to us, and an approach that they've used obviously in other organizations. But Pam or Anna Marie, do you want to jump in on this one too, on the CMA front?
It's Pam here, and yes, thanks. I think Tim has covered it well. I think what we're the data that we're presenting here is the data and an analysis that CCDI used. I think your point is taken, and I think we may need to do further exploration, but that is, yeah, this is the information we have at this point.
Okay, that helps. And I just have one other question. I mean, often we see underrepresented people kind of being tasked with fixing the problem of their underrepresentation. So I'm just hoping that you can sort of explain how the city is approaching this, and how you plan to have a kind of corporation-wide approach with involvement of all levels and staff, not just the underrepresented ones, as this work moves forward.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, again to Councillor Bonagor, for sure, a great question. I think our survey does baseline where we are as an organization, and it provides us guidance on where we need to go. This information has been widely shared across the entire corporation, all staff. And we then formed up those working groups that Pam spoke of in the presentation to help drive the process forward. And we have people involved at all levels from across the organization. So I'm confident that we will move the needle on this. I think we all recognize that representation matters in the workplace, and as I noted, it's a journey. It's not happening like instantaneously, but we are going to get there.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, all I can do is wish you well as this moves forward. It's very valuable. Thank you.
And that's a good way to summarize it, Councillor Bonagor. Very valuable, a lot of work, but it's not only the right thing to do, it'll certainly improve the organization and lead us to be a better city corporation. So lots of effort here. I do know that Councillor Vasic wanted to move this, so I'll turn it over to Councillor Vasic.
Thanks, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I did want to move this. I'm very glad to see the report come forward, and I wanted to thank everyone for doing the report, but also setting it up so that it could come back already in the spring from last December when we passed the motion related to this. So I just wanted to thank everyone for all their work. And one of the things that wasn't in the report itself, but I wanted to highlight, was the work that staff have done around hiring the Director of Indigenous Initiatives, Anti-Racism, Accessibility and Equity. That team, it was so thoughtfully done, and it involved engaging and paying local community members to review and provide comment on the job application or the job posting. And you know, I think that that's really important, that engagement, the payment, and also just through the process acknowledging that, you know, we're doing our best and we're going to make mistakes along the way and we want to learn. And every time I saw feedback given to the team, it was just taken as a learning. And I did the same myself. I learned through the process. So it wasn't highlighted in the report, but I wanted to highlight it because I just think it was done so thoughtfully. And I really appreciate seeing that another census will be administered here in the next 2 to 3 years, because I think that's a big point that we heard at the council meeting from the delegates, is that it's not just about the talent attraction, but it's also about their retention when they're here working in the culture, which is going to be a new experience for everyone, and making sure that the culture is not a toxic one. And so I just think that the groundwork that's being done is being done so thoughtfully, and I wanted to thank everyone. And on that note, I would like to move the report and vote in favor of it.
And I'll look.
Councillor Henry, so go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Henry. I was just going to call upon you.
Yeah, I was trying to remember whether you tapped somebody else or we're going to go in more order. I'm happy to second this motion and vote in favor of it.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much to Tim, Pam, Anna Marie, all the team members working on this, and really all employees of the City of Waterloo, knowing that we have a culture here and a culture here that we can improve. And it's going to take serious work on all of our parts in order to make this the great place we know it to be. So thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Vasic, for your great comments as you move this motion. Next up, we move on to staff reports, item B, community cash grants. This is just for information, and I do know that Councillor Hanmer has served on this and would like to certainly make some comments, and I do believe there might be others as well from Councillor Bonagor. So please go ahead, Councillor Hanmer.
If it's all right with you, Mayor, I'll defer to Councillor Bonagor for her questions, and then I'll do the comments and make the recommendation at the end.
Awesome. We'll have you back cleanup. Excellent idea. Please go ahead, Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. So Beth, I was just hoping you could give us a little bit more information here. It's a really challenging time for all of us, but especially community groups. So I'm just wondering if staff could give us an idea of how the city is helping groups manage their events and their projects, given that we're still being buffeted by COVID. And I'm just wondering what kind of flexibility is being offered for the recipients of these grants.
Through you, Mayor. Just a sound test here. You can hear me?
You are excellent, Beth. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So yeah, a few things that we did this year to be more flexible and make things work in relation to COVID-19. For both 2020 and 2021 recipients of a project grant, normally the project would have to be completed within the calendar year. If an organization is not able to complete their project because of the pandemic, they just need to let us know, and we're allowing groups to carry forward funding to the next year. If their project needs to pivot somehow from what they originally proposed because of the pandemic, we're allowing that as well. They just need to have sort of a chat with staff to make sure that it still aligns with the purpose of the grant. And we've also allowed a number of things this year through the application process. So we let applicants know that we would support purchase of PPE to support their activities, transitioning to virtual or distance events. So normally if an organization, it's something they do as part of their regular operating, we would not support that through a project grant. But this year, if there was any kind of COVID pivot, it was eligible for project funding. And then also supporting innovative ideas. We also allowed groups that are in a debt or deficit situation. We were more flexible in looking at their finances this year, recognizing that over the course of 2020, folks have had challenges with revenue because events have had to be canceled. And this year, as well as in most years, we reached out to any groups if there were questions or any clarification that we needed to understand their application better, so that we could make sure that we had all the information the committee needed to make a good decision.
Okay, thank you so much for that detail. I think as someone who has organized events before, like I can't imagine trying to pull something together in these times. So I'm very thankful to you on their behalf for kind of digging in to all of this muck with them to find a way forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonagor. I see no further questions, Councillor Hanmer, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to offer for council's information and also some gratitude to Beth and her team for really pulling together and working with the organizations. When we started this process this year, I wasn't sure how many grants we would actually get because of all of the difficulties that our groups were having with COVID, but Beth and her team really went above and beyond to assist organizations as they were completing their applications, to give them ideas of things to think about with their projects. And as Beth has just talked to us about, anything that was related to pivoting to keep our organizations moving forward in the city with COVID was included, so that by the time the things came to the committee, which I have to also offer a lot of gratitude and thanks, there was only one returning member on the committee, and that was our committee chair, Paul Rostrup. And the rest of the members very quickly got up to speed on what was happening within the different areas. The committee was able to gel together, work together very thoughtfully to think about what are the things that can keep our organizations and affiliate groups moving forward. So I'm pleased on behalf of Council to be part of that group and to be landing with support for all of our groups who had submitted grant applications for projects that will keep our city moving, keep the organizations that we're supporting moving. And it truly was a team effort in carrying this process out this year. The next big portion that the cash grants group does is the neighborhood matching fund. And I know that Beth and her team are equally working as hard behind the scenes to support that process as it goes forward. So again, Beth, a debt of gratitude to you and your team to making this year's process work as smoothly as it did, and for us to be able to fund and support the organizations. Council should be pleased that we spent all the money that that had been allocated to the group. Obviously could have spent more, but it is going to good purposes and will help our community greatly. So with that, I'm happy to make the motion that Council receive the Community Cash Grants Committee report for information, and I will vote in favor.
Councillor Rodley, I'm happy to second the motion and also vote in favor as well.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasek in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. Thanks very much for Councillor Hanmer for your efforts in this, and certainly to the team and all the work. Obviously, the team seems to make the work easy for us, so that's a good thing. And it's great to see dozens of local organizations getting investments from the City of Waterloo. So thank you all very much. We move on to item C, demolition control applications 2020 summary prepared by Brandon Thompson. Does anyone have any questions on this item? Oh, did I miss one? Hold on, I'm on the wrong page. I'm doing earlier stuff. No wonder it sounded familiar. Item C, award of tender, RFT 2101, Longfellow Drive Road Reconstruction. We have a report here prepared for us by Mike Lupsa. Any questions on this approval of the tender? Seeing none, I will go to the ward councillor to start this off.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to move this recommendation and vote in favor. When things come back in on budget, that's always good.
And Councillor Bonagor is just off for a moment, so let's go ahead to Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer, I'm happy to second the motion, and I will vote in favor.
Councillor Rodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasek in favor.
The mayor's in favor too. I'll just do a quick call out to Councillor Bonagor if she's connected yet. And she isn't, but that approved unanimously with one person absent during the vote. Item D, funding release. She'll want to be here for this. Alexandra Park expansion funding release. The report prepared for us by Andrea Baszler. Does anybody have any questions on that? But I bet you Councillor Bonagor does. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to item E. And we're going to talk about the Urban Design Manual. We'll come back to voting on that one. Item E, Urban Design Manual Refresh Initiation, prepared by Max Kerrigan. Does anybody have any questions on the Urban Design manual refresh. Hearing none. Oh, thank you, Councillor Henry, for helping us stall. Councillor Henry has a question.
I think I'd be happy to help staff filibuster this until Councillor Bonagor is back for the other item. But my legitimate question on here that I thought of is, I know that Council had provided direction at, I think, the previous meeting with the University Avenue Gateway approval, that document be incorporated into the urban design manual refresh. I didn't formally see that mentioned here, but I assume it's included in scope, but thought I would confirm that with staff.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry. This is Max Kerrigan. Thank you for the question. Absolutely, that among several other already adopted documents and guidelines will be incorporated into this greater UVM refresh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henry. And with your keen interest, I will look for you to move and Councillor Bonagor to consider seconding this urban design manual refresh initiation.
Happy to move the recommendation to receive the report and to vote in favor.
And this is Councillor Bonagor, happy to second this and will vote in favour.
Councillor Hanmer is in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Max, for bringing it to council. Now let's go to skip back to item D, the funding release for the Alexandra Park expansion, prepared by Andrea Basler. To Councillor Bonagor, no other councillors I don't think had any questions on this, but I thought you might have a comment and perhaps might wish to move it.
Indeed, thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I am very excited to move this. It's been a hard time to try and bring a project like this forward, and I just want to really commend staff for being as creative as they could be in reaching out to the community, showing them the big reveal for the park. It's going to be fantastic, and I just can't wait to see it all come to fruition. But I do just really want to thank staff for not only working so hard on this from the before times, before the pandemic, but really trying new things and new ways to do engagement and outreach that I suspect will probably carry forward once we do emerge from these strange days. So with that, I will move the motion and vote in favour.
Councillor Hanmer, I'm happy to second the motion, and I too will vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. Thank you very much to the team for helping improve Alexander Street Park. Now that you have those extra 2 lots on the back side of it, that's wonderful. And with that, we move on. There's no notices of motion or consideration of notice of motion from previous meetings. We do have some communications. It's the annual time to larvicide. It's a letter of permission to larvicide from the region of Waterloo Public Health as part of their West Nile virus program, looking for a recommendation from us so that I may sign the letter of permission. And I will look to Councillor Veith. That's the Ward 3, Ward 4. I don't think we've heard from in a while. Ward 3, Ward 4, please.
I move the motion and vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman, I'll second the motion and also vote in favor.
Councillor Vasek in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. We have no unfinished business, but coming up next, we have questions followed by new business. Is there anyone who has questions of staff that they wish to put out here at this time? Questions of management. Councillor Freeman, please go ahead.
Thank you. It can either be under questions or new business. I had a long conversation with a constituent today with regard, or not today, but last week with regard to internet service in the city of Waterloo. And with everything going on with the pandemic, having reliable internet service is really important. And certainly in my ward, there's parts of my ward that were constructed many years ago, and the internet service is pretty unreliable. And even other service providers, other than I would say the big two, they tend to sit on the backbone of either Bell or Rogers. And so connectivity issues that are present with regard to those two service providers exist, even if you try to go with a different service provider. And I just didn't know whether there's any role that the city can play with regard to attracting new service providers, with facilitating access into the utility corridor to try to get more opportunity for citizens to gain access to reliable internet.
Jaworski, I'll take that one to Councillor Freeman. That's probably something we'll have to take away and dig a little bit deeper on. I can offer a few comments. When the region of Waterloo and the area municipalities were working on the SWIFT, Southwestern Ontario Integrated Fiber Network, we did do a fair amount of consultation with the local service providers of what the coverage areas look like within the urban area versus the rural areas of Waterloo region. And I'm going by memory, but the urban coverage seemed fairly good. But as you know, there's probably some weaknesses still within the system. I will attempt to try and find that information and see if we can even get it updated from the current providers, and also provide a little bit of an update on the SWIFT work and what's happening with respect to new providers within Waterloo region.
That'd be great. And I guess if there's a role for council, like in terms of providing direction to ECDEV or WEDC or whatever that looks like, it would be helpful to know that too.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, good question, Councillor Freeman. I know this comes up during regional council meetings where 1, 2, 3, or 4 people can sometimes have difficulty connecting from home to in an urban environment to in a less urban environment. So it is prevalent out there, that's for sure. And in these days, I think people look at internet as probably one, if not their most valuable, one of their most valuable utilities that they have. So thank you for that. Councillor Veith, I wasn't sure if you were going to bring up something under questions or new business.
No, just a couple comments about some events.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. I don't see any further questions. Let's go with new business. First to Councillor Veith, then to Councillor Bonagor.
Okay, thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention 2 events, virtual events that I went to on the weekend that just shows how great this community is at pivoting their events. The KW Zonta Club, they had the second part of 3 parts of an event that they're putting on instead of their usual Women's Day event, and it was just really well done. It was really fun. It was a dance thing, and there was a ton of people on the call. And then the other one was I wanted to acknowledge you, Mayor, for the Geese hospice opening. Again, I mean, that was pre-recorded, but just so well done and efficient, great stories, great little bit of entertainment. So I just want to say that, like, sometimes when you sign up for these events, you really don't know what you're getting, what's coming. But I must say that our community has really come together and been very creative about involving the community and getting their name out there and continuing to work hard to support the community in whatever way they do it. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Veith. You know, I think we owe a big thank you at the end of the Hospice Waterloo region. They did a thank you to a number of organizations, and one was to Mr. Tim Anderson and the staff at the City of Waterloo. And I do know that staff worked very hard on this, certainly from the council decision with respect to donation, but also the roads and that. And they have certainly a lot more work to do in landscaping, and Mr. Anderson, in a quick tour of that last week, saw some needs that he's going to work on with staff. So I think we should pass on behalf of the council to the staff for their part in making Hospice Waterloo Region's vision a reality. And although the grand opening was Sunday, the first person I think moved in last Wednesday. So it's already in use. And just such a wonderful organization that will obviously need more help. By that I mean donations over time as operational costs continue to move on. Mr. Anderson, did you have anything to say about Hospice Waterloo Region, perhaps to the staff?
Thanks, Mayor. To echo your remarks, no, it's been a real team effort. I think it's a project of passion really for many people from across the organization. Our engineering team, our finance team, corporate management team, the environment and parks people, the signage people, the building department, just the list goes on. And it's been exceptional. We have just a real jewel of a facility over on the east side of Waterloo. The signage, Mayor, as you saw, was going up on University Avenue last week, which will just give it a really distinctive address on the new street name there called Solstice Way. And yes, we welcome them, and a tremendous facility. So thanks again, Mayor.
Thank you. And over to Councillor Balagor.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just have a couple of Uptown themes. The first is I just wanted to highlight the awesome work by the Waterloo Public Library and their efforts to really keep engagement fun through the pandemic. Sorry to keep bringing it up, but it's still there. But on the weekend, they had the amazing race, the Uptown amazing race for families. And if anyone who was going through the core between 1 and 4 must have been wondering what was going on, because there were groups of people, each family unit keeping a nice distance from everyone else, everyone with their masks on, having an absolute blast, trying to work out the clues, get to the next location. And it was just, the weather was gorgeous, people were happy, and I just really want to commend the library for upping their game. They really have. And if anyone who's interested, please keep looking at the WPL website and their calendar of events. I am pretty sure that anyone who goes will be surprised at the breadth of offerings. And the other piece of new business is just to let people know that the Uptown BIA has just released the chocolate trail for Uptown, featuring delicious things in many places. It's very dangerous knowledge, and I'm happy to share it so that I'm not the only one getting all these calories.
Good for you. Well, if you're maybe participating in the amazing race, you'll be running around. So anyway, yeah, I've been certainly using the library a lot with it being open now for pickups and that. So yeah, big shout out to our friends at the library. I don't see any further new business, but it comes, we're at the enactment of bylaws, and I will draw your attention to, on the revised agenda, bylaw to authorize municipal clerk to conduct civil marriage solemnization services, and a bylaw to appoint a deputy city clerk, new on the revised agenda. And I do know whose favorite time this is. Councillor Bodley.
Thing that I'm going to most miss about COVID meetings when they eventually die a horrible death. Yes, I would love to move the motion to enact the bylaws and happily vote in favor of it.
Councillor Veith here. I will second the motion and vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. With that, we just need a motion to adjourn. I will go to Ward 1, Ward 2 for that.
Councillor Hanmer, I move that we adjourn the meeting and I vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley seconds the motion and votes in favor as well.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor, and I just want to thank Councillor Bonagor for her comments about the public library, and I'm going to share them at the library board on Wednesday.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor is in favor too. That carries unanimously. Well done, team. 62 minutes. And with that, I'll be signing off. All the best to everyone.